Hello, everybody. I am here tonight to talk about the asteroid Juno. I have been wanting to get to talking more about the mythology in astrology, and tonight I just decided that I think that Juno is the one to talk about. And right now, currently, she is in Sagittarius, along with the cluster of planets that are there in Sagittarius. And so she felt like she was speaking to me and wanted to be talked about. So, tonight I'll be talking about Juno, and I've gotten a lot of my information and material from this book, Asteroid Goddesses by Demetra George, and which is amazing. I recommend it for everybody. And I did a bunch of research on the internet also and about the stories um, about Juno. So, Juno is the Roman goddess of marriage, and she is the queen of the heavens. She is in Greek, she is the Queen Hera, and she was married to Zeus, Zeus's only wife. And so in Roman astrology, Roman belief, which is what astrology is based on, we call her Juno, and we call Zeus Jupiter. So Jupiter and Juno are the divine sacred couple, and yet they share very many stories of not getting along, being at war with each other, and this has a deeper meaning. Um, so one of the things that I had been researching previously to looking into Juno was the constellation of Cancer. So I was thinking back a few months ago that um, the story about Cancer and how the constellation came to be in the sky was a little bit unsatisfactory to me, in my opinion. It just is this sort of story that uh, seems to lack the deeper meaning when it's told. And so, and it's interesting how this ties in actually with Juno, because Juno, and I'll say Hera also interchangeably with Juno for this, because Juno actually belongs more to the pre-Hellenistic um, pantheon of deities that is it's more Hera. Um, Most of these stories are about Hera and Zeus, and then the Romans just took the story, went with it a little bit further. And so the story of how Cancer gets into the constellation in the sky is has to do with Heracles and his 12 labors. The second of those labors that he was assigned to was to defeat the Hydra with many heads. And so, let me get this here. So, yes, so he is sent to his 12 labors, and the second one is to defeat the Hydra. And while he's fighting the Hydra, it's going well for him. It's not going very well for the Hydra. And Hera sends in her very loyal and devoted giant crab to attack Heracles while this is happening. And so the giant crab is named Karkinos. And in the story, it says that this giant crab comes out of the swamps, which I'm sorry, but the giant crab would come out of the ocean, just like a lot of the feminine goddesses are born from the ocean. And so it's a very feminine place. The crab obviously lived in the ocean. And so, but the victor, um, Heracles gets to write the story, right? And so I'm reading between the lines. So the giant crab, makes a little bit of an effort, gets Heracles, but ultimately Heracles kills the crab. And Hera and um, Hera puts the giant crab into the stars to immortalize the the crab for its loyalty. And this is where Cancer season is. It's where Cancer season begins, you know. It's with the constellation of the crab. And so I think one of the things that I wanted to bring attention to is that Juno could be a co-ruler of Cancer along with the moon. And this makes a lot of sense because when you look into the history of Juno and back into the time, the Greek stories of Hera, and even before that, Hera is the triple moon goddess. And so it's interesting that the triple moon goddess, the queen of the heavens, slowly turns into um, the villain when um, when she's provoked, right? Because we'll talk about the reasons why she was provoked when we get into the forced marriage between Zeus and Hera, because Hera existed first. Hera did not have a husband, and Hera was the queen of the heavens, and she had three different faces as the triple moon goddess. She was Hera Parthenia, the child maiden that ruled over childbirth and the new moon and the season of spring. And then there was the face of Hera Telia, which is the bride of the full moon and the fertile summer, fertility of summer. And then there is the face of Hera Chera. And in this phase, she is the solitary widow of the dark moon and the desolate winter. And she, so obviously she comes from the time, before the patriarchy. And um, back when the matriarchy was very strong, right? And um, and so yeah, she was. the um the celebrations that celebrated her were like the Olympics, but pre-Olympics. So there was like foot races and um there was a festival that would um let's see, uh, right, the sacred cow would be sacrificed to Hera because her um very early symbols is the holy heifer, the cow. It was very sort of very paganistic, right? Um, so originally Hera was, or she reigned alone. She had no consort. And then an invading tribe to Hera's tribe um, came to Greece, and there was a forced marriage between this invading tribe, which honored Zeus, and this matriarchal tribe, which honored Hera. And this forced marriage was supposed to bring harmony to these tribes that came together. And, they called it a sacred marriage. And for a long time, they were having festivals on March 1st for the Heros Gamos. I'm not sure how to say it, but it's the sacred marriage between the king and the queen of the sky. You know, the king of the sky, the queen of the heavens. And it's all a very beautiful idea. And it does um, serve a purpose for our modern society because the people were changing. Um, People were needing uh, the family unit as far as having a patriarch um, protect and the matriarch nurture. This idea was becoming more popular, but the stories about Hera and Zeus really do explain the troubles between these like tribes coming together and trying to make peace and harmony um, by coming together. And, ultimately, like I said, the victor gets to write the stories. And so Zeus's tribe wins in the real world. And so Zeus's tribe gets to write all of the stories about um, the heroes and how Hera was such a meanie and evil and murderous. But why why on earth would she be so full of rage, madness? Because this is a running theme that we take into our astrological analysis with Juno is madness in relationships. The madness that runs through a relationship when it has gone sideways. It is like war, right? Because two people who once loved each other are ready to end each other in some cases. Not all of them, but this is like the classic way that people break up is with lots of anger and rage and um, revenge, vengeance. The stories that we bring along with us after a relationship is ended is really at the core of why we have these stories about Hera and her rage at Zeus's infidelity. And because Hera, Hera represents a certain kind of commitment, and she is loyal. And so Juno in our charts represents a certain type of loyalty and commitment, but it also represents where and how we might lose our minds over a relationship. So this is one of the reasons why um, bringing the mythology into the reading of a chart, especially when you're going to bring the asteroids in, is very helpful because you can see that there is more to the story than just the crazy lady that's lost her mind. Yeah, it really depends on where we have Juno in our chart as to how we're going to respond to infidelity and um, uh, we have expectations of loyalty and commitment. So, yeah, let's see, what else is there? Um, there is so much, so much. This Juno story really took me down the rabbit hole, and so it's been uh, interesting to try to figure out how to tell this the way that I want to tell it. All right. So one of the things about the astrology of Juno is it can describe a certain kind of pathology in relationships. And so the pathologies are usually associated with the sign Scorpio and because of intensity, right? But I believe that we should be bringing the sign of Cancer in also because it provides more of a foundation for why these pathologies exist. Because the the sign of Scorpio, with like the issues of um, manipulation, power dynamics, um, emotional control. All of these are just very intense expressions that have something deeper underneath. And, you know, Cancer, the sign of Cancer, it really lays the foundation for all of Hera's and Juno's, um, her expectation, her morals, the entire reason why loyalty even matters. is because there's a contract. And so Juno, yes, is about contracts. But why? But why? So, because a contract in itself is sacred, because a commitment in itself is sacred, because it underlying this commitment is an intention. So, if this intention is not pure, then you're not going to experience like the authentic will for loyalty. And this is really a very deep underlying theme with Juno that we can look at in our charts. Where is Juno in your chart? She wants to have power in that place, no doubt. But not like Pluto. No. And this is why manipulation doesn't come in on the scene yet. All that Juno really wants is for you to make good on that commitment and to have like pure intentions. And if that's not the case, then things will go sideways. Things will go into that realm of jealousy, manipulation, and all of those like scorpionic themes. And so there's like these layers to Juno that I think is really important to look at because we can understand the nature of our relationships and the projection that we're projecting out because of our chart. And we can understand that better in the um, realm of relationships if we look into our Juno placement. It's going to be a little bit harsh. Will have to admit certain things about yourself that you require in relationships and commitments. There'll be certain things about the placement that says that this particular thing that you want out of a relationship is, um, what do they say? There's no other way to do it. Well, I can't think of the word. Obviously, because I'm not very good at it. So, um, when when Juno is experiencing like the shadow side of, the expression, there's going to be this imbalance of sacrifice in relationships. And Juno is sensitive to that. Juno is good at sacrificing, but then there is an edge, a point that she comes to. And then, you know, and then the different kinds of fears pop up. There is fear of abandonment, strongly associated with Juno, um, because this is one of the reasons why we even have a companion and a partner in the first place, right? It's because we're a little bit afraid to be alone. This is one of the things that's harsh to admit about yourself. But if you really look into it, it's like, are you a person that needs more space and alone time? Um, or are you afraid to be alone? Fear of betrayal is one of the issues of in Juno, the astrology. Um, because sometimes with Juno in a particularly um, not so good placement, this fear of betrayal is completely imagined. And it is that fear of betrayal that basically keeps it going and happening. It just keeps happening because you're self-prophesizing. You think it's going to happen and then it does. And this is an important thing to think about with regards to your Juno placement, is if you do have Juno in a place like Scorpio, um, you are going to be a magnet for that betrayal, and that fear is going to be strong. But there is something um, that's being asked to be integrated so that that fear of betrayal isn't so strong and you're not such a magnet for actually being betrayed. It's a huge theme actually for Juno because Jupiter, same person, same being, was definitely not faithful. Very ironic considering Jupiter, the planet of faith, is not a very faithful personality in the stories. But there's a reason for that. It's because Jupiter actually represents the part of us that like never wants to grow up, really. And that's a little secret. And if you're one of my very, very few followers, there you go. The secret. Another fear that comes up with Juno is the fear of sexuality because of all of the stories of infidelity. There is a element of fear of even opening yourself up to um, sexuality, love, being loved in that way. And, in a man's chart, Juno can really represent where he is afraid of being consumed by the very powerful feminine archetype. Um, that is one of the things to look at and consider. And this is all the like shadow side of Juno that I'm going over right here. Um, we've got power dynamics with Juno, and either we're giving away too much power where our Juno is because we have an energy leak and we don't know how to not leak that energy in relationships, and we're constantly giving away our power there. That could be one of the things about our Juno placement. Or another thing is that with regards to power dynamics in relationships, is that Juno could represent where you are most likely to use a form of manipulation on other people, or possibly where you're being manipulated, but we're taking accountability here right now. So when we're looking at our chart, we're going to be looking at our what we're responsible for. So it's a good thing when you're looking at the placement of your Juno to ask yourself, um, how do I use subtle forms of manipulation, and what am I getting out of that? What kind of imbalance of power is driving you to do that? Um, so another thing to consider about the power dynamics of Juno in relationships is using children as like power pieces. Like, you know, both Jupiter and Juno used children, offspring, to get at each other. And that's kind of really ugly. So Jupiter, Jupiter and Juno, the dynamic between them might describe how you and your partner might be uh, using uh, using your children to basically one up on each other. And that's pretty hard one to look at, but it's worth looking at. 'Cause nobody really wants to be using their kids as, pawns, a relationship that's awful. Um, and so one of the last things about Juno and the power dynamics in relationships is, like I said a little bit earlier, that Juno can represent where we're projecting um, uh, like a repressive element. We're projecting that something is repressing us on, out there in the external. And uh, sometimes it's about, um, letting your partner take all of the, or, take all of the power in the relationship so that all of the shadow expressions that are from your own Juno are being expressed in your partner. And this is one of the very complicated things about Juno in our charts is that we could be using Juno to, it's like blaming another person, you know, very, very, here is the very typical description of this. A woman is in a relationship with a man who's a narcissist. This is literally the playing out of Jupiter and Juno, because Jupiter is a narcissist, obviously. I mean, there's no way around it. And Juno is being hurt by that. But instead of Juno taking responsibility for um, her own feelings, she projects and says that Zeus is the problem, and Zeus's illegitimate children are all the problem. And that's where this projection thing gets really um, dangerous. It's because we're not actually, you know, we're not looking at how we attracted this experience with the narcissist, you know. Um, Literally, yes, or Hera is forced into a marriage with Zeus, and instead of just living her own life, she is enraged by his infidelity. And it shouldn't be surprising. And I'm just sort of putting a real life spin on this because all of these stories are actually built with a high purpose. But um, but it's just one of those things that we can look at Juno in our chart and see where we might be blaming, not taking responsibility for our own feelings and our own actions, our own decisions. Um, Juno is represents um, those who lack power. She is the she stands up for those who uh, are perceived to be powerless. And so, of course, this is why Juno is going to like project out there that somebody else hurt me. Somebody else is hurting me. 'Cause I'm not hurting myself because I'm actually powerless. And so that is actually, it seems like it is, it seems like it would be a good thing that Juno stands up for the powerless, which is a good thing. But being too identified with being powerless is the shadow side of that. Yeah. That one's a kind of a little bit complicated. To move into the positive things about Juno in astrological realm. So Juno rules over all one-on-one, one-to-one relationships. So it's like, you like friendship, marriage, business relationship, any kind of partnering. Um, so it's going to be about one-on-one. And I think that counseling is part of that, ultimately. I think that Juno can be an indicator of where you might be strong as a counselor. And yeah. So Juno also rules over marriage rituals and the institution of marriage, the institution of partnership, even over separation and divorce. Um, Childbirth. She is a rules over childbirth and weddings, courtship, and essentially feminine virtue, which includes being loyal, faithful. Um, she is a significator of protocol and social ritual, which is about like hospitality, etiquette, and um, just the social fabric of how we should be in relationship with one another, just generally. Um, she is a ruler. See, Juno rules over enhancing feminine beauty. So things like makeup and dressing up and fragrances and glamour and decor. Um, Juno is a good indicator of where your where your feminine beauty is coming from. What is it really saying about you? Juno also represents creative talent in the arts, dance, drama, performing arts, like the feminine side of creation. And so she stands up for women's rights. She stands up and is a symbol for the powerless. And she is associated with the atmosphere because she's the queen of the heavens. So ultimately, Juno is out there fighting for clean and pure air because we all deserve it. It's one of those things. Um, and there was something that I thought was interesting about the story of Juno, Hera, and how it connects to the symbol of apples that runs throughout many different cultures. And if you look up Juno, it'll say that her association is more like the pomegranate, but there is the story of the gift from Gaia to Hera when she marries Zeus, a tree of golden apples. And so Hera has a garden, private garden that is guarded in the West, I believe. And this is where the edge of society, the edge of everything. And so this garden exists um, just before um, where, like the gods can go, you know, just in between earth and the heavens. And in one of the stories about Zeus and Hera is Zeus is in unfaithful, has an illegitimate child named Heracles. And I was already talking about Heracles with the sign of Cancer and the crab and the giant crab. But there's another little part to that story in the 12 labors. And in order for it to make sense, I should go backwards. So Hera is absolutely insane with rage and resentment at this illegitimate child, Heracles, who is Hercules in Roman myth, Heracles in Greek myth. And so Hera drives Heracles mad. And this is a recurring theme for Hera, or Juno, is the like a mental madness. So she has the ability to drive him crazy, and he kills his family. And this is horrible, you know. And when he finds out what he did, he begs for forgiveness from the king, and the king assigns the 12 labors. But the king is under the influence of Hera also. So him Heracles originally going mad had to do with Hera having an influence, and then the king um, assigning these 12 labors had everything to do with Hera having an influence on these 12 labors. And the 11th labor was to steal the golden apples from the garden. And they don't call it Hera's garden. And it's the garden of the Hesperides, and it's guarded by a dragon and the nymphs. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up about the dragon is that this is very, very, very ancient. The dragon is not just an evil dragon. The dragon is a symbol that represents the very, very, very ancient form of the matriarchy. The dragon is usually a grandmother. And so, even though this isn't explicitly stated in the story, I know that this is one of the meanings behind the dragon guarding anything, and the dragon guarding the golden apples. Well, what are the golden apples? And the golden apples are the gift of immortality. So the task of the labor of stealing these apples was initially intended to humiliate Heracles or kill Heracles because dragon, right? But Heracles succeeded and steals three golden apples. And it's interesting that the number three is there because Hera is the triple moon goddess. And again, so that symbolism is there repeating itself so that we remember uh, there is a little memory in there that Hera is the triple moon goddess. And, as the story plays out, yeah, so he wins and he got the apples, but those apples ultimately had to be returned to Hera because nobody was allowed to have them because they're the gift of immortality. And even Heracles couldn't keep them um, because that he knew that it wasn't okay. And so the apples, they do get returned to Hera, as they always do. The apples always get returned to Hera, to the queen. There's something in that reminds me of another story that has to do with a singular apple being stolen from a garden in a story about our origins, right? And so when I came across that, I thought it was very interesting that it looks as though the story of Adam and Eve with the apple is just another installation of the apples being stolen and what the repercussion is. And when you know what the golden apples are in Greek and Roman myth, it's very understandable why Adam and Eve couldn't have the apples. It's because it's more immortality, and that is not why we're here. We're not here to experience immortality. And anytime humans mess with that idea, there is a kicking out of sorts. And I just think that's interesting that when I followed that thread with Juno to the golden apples and that 11th labor of Heracles, that it just suddenly came to me that this is another, just, the Adam and Eve story is just another way of saying that immortality is a dangerous thing to even be messing with because that's just not why we're here. Um, the and ultimately, as the gods know and have displayed with their crazy stories, that immortality gets boring, and then you start playing around with things that you shouldn't be playing around with, and doing things and having crazy stories. Um, but that is beside the point. I just wanted to go there for a moment because there is something about the Queen of the Heavens that ties to our Adam and Eve story of origin, that we hold in modern time. Those apples still exist, and those apples were stolen. They're still stolen, and something happens because of that. Yes, very interesting. And yeah, I mentioned earlier that the 1st of March is when the Romans would honor the sacred marriage between Jupiter and Juno. And interestingly, this is a cute little fact, is that this is where the tradition of cakes come in, because the Romans would have cakes to honor the matrimony. And matrimonium contains the root word for mother and is protected legally by Juno. So, one of the reasons why I was thinking that it it could be that Juno could be a co-ruler of Cancer is because literally the reason why the month is named June is because of Juno, right? And in June is the start of Cancer season on June 20th. And so, and that in itself says to me that bringing Juno in on sign of Cancer and bringing some of that kind of, mm, the matriarchy, the deep ancestry of the feminine waters that everything is born from. And, Juno kind of opens up that mystery and she makes it more accessible. You can see that there is a foundation to the uh, the values that Juno holds dearly, and these values have everything to do with protecting the closest parts of your family out of love and honor and commitment and intention. Because having a family without intention can be kind of chaotic. And um, so thinking about how Juno opens up that, the Juno opens up more meaning to the sacred marriage and how the feminine element in a sacred marriage is actually very strong um, and foundational. And I said this earlier to a friend, and it's like women are the chicken and the egg. So we are the foundation. We have the building blocks, the foundation of life inside of us. And this is one of the great mysteries to being a human is where did we come from? Who put us here? And, you know, are we the chicken? Are we the egg? We're both. Uh, and maybe I will do another video some other time about Juno through the signs and the houses because that could be that can lead to learning more about yourself and relationships. I, I'm hoping that this video was informational and that you got something out of it. And I really appreciate you hanging in there and learning this stuff with me. It was fascinating looking into this. And I can't believe where it led me to. It's just very interesting. So thanks for joining me. I will see you next time.